So, distinguished guests, participants, colleagues, students from all over Europe and beyond that. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Stéphanie Shaelou. I am a professor of European law and reform. I'm also the head of the law school here at UCLan Cyprus, and I am the director of the Monnet Center of Excellence on the rule of law and European values at UCLan Cyprus, which is CRoLEV. So on behalf of the school and the CRoLEV team, who we will meet later, I would like to welcome you to today's launch. It's a real pleasure to have you here, and it's a real pleasure to be able to launch the event or the CRoLEV NET with so many different people and so many varied backgrounds. We have professionals, we have students, we even have, I think, members of the judiciary online. We have CSO representatives, lots of researchers from all over Europe. And we are here in Pila at the university campus as well. So I would like to warmly thank all our special guests. You can see actually their names on the program here, for joining us today virtually and for their willingness and enthusiasm to speak to us today. I'm sure you're also eager to listen to them. I will introduce them in turn when actually they take the floor. There will be other opportunities for CRoLEV NET members or experts to actually present their work. So please, bear with us. We have three special guests today. We will have more in the events to come. But I would like to thank all participants, whether on campus here at UCLan Cyprus in Pila or online. And I want to say that our very special thanks go to our colleagues and students from Ukraine. We have some actually with us physically on campus. We also have a lot online. So our very best wishes to all of you. And we are with you. Also to thank my colleagues, Katerina and Andreas, and all the others who have helped towards the launch of the CRoLEV NET. So just a few words, because we don't have much time, about what it is that we do at CRoLEV. We have an ambitious work plan, which can be summarized in a few key objectives and priorities. Our objectives are actually 4 main objectives. 3 of them are related to research and impact, and 1 of them is related to teaching and learning. We also have a cross-cutting priority, which is to work with colleagues across Europe as a continent and even beyond. We have colleagues in other continents, on other continents as well, on the actual upholding and protection of the rule of law and European values. You will hear more about that from Andreas and Katerina. But before we do this, let me share with you how we function at CRoLEV. So we have an organigram of governance. You can see that other than Katerina, Andreas, and myself, who are director, chief researcher, and senior researcher, there are a number of people around and a number of bodies around us. So we have 2 boards. The first board is the stakeholder board. We had the first meeting of the stakeholder board just before this CRoLEV NET launch. We have a scientific advisory board. We will meet them in the next slide. There will be soon a postdoc of CRoLEV. There are a lot of colleagues who are acting as trainers, mainly in the School of Law, but not only. It's cross-disciplinary. We have officers as well, and of course, all our target groups are potentially participants to the CRoLEV activities. In addition to support that we get from the university services, and of course from the academic leads across Europe and experts across Europe, the role of the CRoLEV NET is fundamental, as you can see, because it actually lies at the foundation of the organigram. So this is what we're launching today, is this foundation of the CRoLEV structure. Now, for some reason, okay, I don't have the slide with all of us on it, but don't worry, you will meet Andreas and Katerina later. I just have the slide for the Scientific Advisory Board. Just a few words about them. They are all prominent, of course, in their fields and in the Cyprus society for the first 4 of them. They have been chosen for their, of course, high profile, but also for their well-known independence of judgment. And the role of the Scientific Advisory Board is actually to quality assure the research at CRoLEV. So starting from the left of the slide, going to the right of the slide, you can find the Honorable Justice Dr. Akis Hajihambis, who is retired, who is the former president, one of the former presidents of the Supreme Court of Cyprus, but he's also an honorary fellow at the School of Law in Cyprus. You also find Her Excellency Dr. Marcou, retired, who is former ambassador and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Cyprus, who is also an honorary fellow at the School of Law in Cyprus. We also have the Honorable Mr. Justice George Arestis, retired too, former judge, actually first Cypriot judge to the Court of Justice of the European Union, who is also an honorary fellow at the School of Law in Cyprus. And the Honorable Mr. Justice Kostas Kouridis, retired, who is the former Advocate General of the Republic of Cyprus. He was actually awarded an honorary doctorate from the University of Central Lancashire, UK. And last but not least, our colleague, Dr. Henrik Andersen, who is based in Copenhagen, but he's also a senior visiting fellow at the School of Law in Cyprus. So these people, their role is to quality assure the research we do, whereas the stakeholder board, the role is more to oversee knowledge transfer activities. So you will hear from them and we will invite them to some events. Now, for all of us here today, we are obviously potentially CRoLEV friends, one way or another, whether you decide to become more active into the CRoLEV net or whether you just follow the activities of CRoLEV. What is original about CRoLEV is the way we have set up project management structures and procedures and deliverables that we submit to the European Union. We also have a very well developed QA strategy, quality assurance strategy, with a focus on knowledge transfer and interinstitutional relations across Europe and beyond. We publish everything we do onto the CRoLEV platform, which you can visit by clicking on the link which is on my slides, or by just Googling CRoLEV and you will find it. As I said, the role of the stakeholder board is to oversee the QA process for all knowledge transfer activities, processes and outputs, and interinstitutional relations. And the CRoLEV net, its role is to basically bring together a network of stakeholders and experts on the rule of law, European values. All of you potentially are experts on the rule of law and European values. Everyone is welcome to get in touch. On the slides, you can see the email of CRoLEV. You're very welcome to send an email to us and tell us how you would like to participate. A few announcements. As I said, if you want to be kept informed of what we do at CRoLEV, please visit the website and subscribe to the newsletter or subscribe to the website. Then you will automatically be informed of what we do, but you need to give your consent. So there will be multiple events, CRoLEV events, to which you will be invited. We're also happy to engage with lawyers, professionals, the judiciary, policymakers, NGOs, or even embassies to present CRoLEV. So get in touch with us for that. So if you want to take an active part in anything we do, please get in touch. And we have a number of announcements on the website. First of all, we have a call for expression of interest for the CRoLEV editorial board. You can visit the post on the website, and soon there will be a CRoLEV postdoctoral researcher position, which we will ask you to circulate through your networks. So please Follow us on social media, Facebook and Twitter. Visit the website. This is my email in case anyone would like to get in touch with me particularly, but you also have the CRoLEV main email. Now, I realized that I should have said a few more things, particularly in terms of how to handle the meeting room. Please have your mics and cameras off at all times. This is for people who are online. In the folder of the MS Teams, by the way, maybe we need to add also people who are present in person to the MS Teams. There are a lot of materials that everybody's free to take away from this meeting with the proper acknowledgement to whoever or whatever you are using. And this is more or less what I wanted to say. And now let me actually introduce our next speaker, Dr. Andreas Marcou. Andreas is a lecturer in EU law and theory. He's also the LLB deputy course leader at the School of Law in Europe and Cyprus, and he's the CRoLEV chief researcher and project manager. Andreas will talk to you about the CRoLEV research objectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stéphanie, for the presentation and for the introduction. For those of you who haven't heard, my name is Andreas, and I'll talk to you about the various research objectives that CRoLEV has. In particular, CRoLEV has a series of different objectives, not limited to research. So in terms of general objectives that we're looking to achieve here at CRoLEV, we wish to explore the state of the rule of law. To do that, we are also going to use empirical methods, so apply empirical methodologies to collect data and do that. We wish to also investigate the deterioration of the rule of law and other European values across the European Union. I'll say more about that in a bit. We wish to also scrutinize and evaluate the various mechanisms that the EU has in terms of protecting and safeguarding its values. And last, we are, in fact, delivering research-informed teaching in various forms. Today, I will focus on the first three objectives, so the research objectives for CRoLEV. I am going to say a few things about these objectives in general, and then I'm going to try to make it a bit more specific about the direction we're taking in tackling these objectives, which, as you can see, are quite broad. So our general objective is to study and identify the state of the rule of law within the European Union primarily, but also beyond that, in times of crisis. So that's what's very interesting to us. At the time, the European Union faces various threats to the rule of law. We are going to hear presentations later today about the state of the rule of law in Poland and in Hungary and other countries of the European Union. And we could say that we are witnessing a sort of rule of law and democratic backsliding in various European countries. So that's certainly part of our motivation for this project, to study that backsliding, study the causes for it. And this, of course, could lead us to proposals about how we can change that picture. In terms of current crisis, of course, COVID-19 was an unprecedented crisis. And what's interesting about COVID-19 is that it gave rise to various public responses. And those public responses to the pandemic did, in fact, pose questions about the state of the rule of law and of other European values, such as democracy, for instance. We saw many decisions taken without following the proper established democratic procedures. And this, of course, raises questions about the rule of law and about democracy, which we also wish to explore. As I mentioned, the European Union, faced with these various challenges, has tried to take some actions. Arguably, those actions have not been enough, which may, as we're going to suggest, point towards some constitutional, some structural shortcomings of the Union. This, in turn, will lead us to propose some possible remedies to those shortcomings. And lastly, we are going to look at the state of the rule of law in Cyprus, in particular, because Cyprus well, this is where CRoLEV is based, and Cyprus does face its own unique problems with respect to the rule of law and other European values. In terms of the more specific questions that we'd like to explore, CRoLEV follows a previous Jean Monnet module that we had here at the university, EU POP. During that module, we examined the rise of populism within the European Union and how that threatens European values. We are going to continue following that direction. So we are very much interested in seeing how the threat of populism potentially undermines European values. And as I mentioned, we're also interested in looking at how government responses to the pandemic have possibly put a strain on the rule of law and other European values. In terms of the responses of the EU, of course, much has been written about Article 7 of the Treaty of the European Union, a supposedly strong mechanism to combat violations of Article 2. In light of its ineffectiveness, we have new mechanisms now proposed by the European Union. The conditionality regulation is of course, one of them, has not been used yet, but we're very much interested in seeing how it might be used, how it will be used, and potential reasons for using it with frugality, perhaps. In terms of the rule of law in Cyprus, as I assume that those in the room are somewhat familiar with the situation in Cyprus. We have many people in the Teams group who are familiar with the situation in Cyprus. Cyprus faces multiple issues with respect to the rule of law. I've only identified some of them that we're interested in exploring. It's not just corruption, it's also the inefficiency of justice, which is something that has been flagged up in multiple indices and frameworks about the rule of law in Cyprus. But much of the data existing for the state of the rule of law in Cyprus is insufficient, and this is where our empirical research come in. We wish to explore the state of the rule of law, but adopting different perspectives to the rule of law. So we are very much interested in adopting broadened conceptions of what the rule of law entails. So we're not interested in those narrow approaches to the rule of law that are limited to looking at legal institutions, right? The judicial independence, for instance, of course, that's fundamental for the rule of law, but we don't think that this is the only thing there. And we are very much interested in teasing out those connections between the rule of law and other European values. And this would lead us to asking sort of some different questions when it comes to the rule of law in Cyprus and of course elsewhere. Perhaps shifting attention away from traditional targets of rule of law investigations, such as the courts, to other possible avenues in that respect, such as insiders to the legal system. So, for example, how lawyers understand the rule of law, how they operate within a system of the rule of law, and so forth. So, these are the research objectives for CRoLEV in a nutshell. I've tried to be brief. I am, of course, and the entire team is welcoming your comments and your recommendations, your suggestions, either during the Q&A towards the end or even after the meeting. If you have any ideas or if you'd like to contribute in any way, feel free to contact us. Our emails are on the website, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andreas. I hope you can still hear us, everyone who is online. Thank you for sharing with us the salient details of our objectives, ambitious objectives. Let me now call on Katerina, Dr. Katerina Kalaitzaki, who is she's a lecturer in EU Business Law at the School of Law of Cyprus, and she's also senior researcher at CRoLEV. Thank you, Katerina. Your presentation is one.
Yes. Okay, so thank you very much, Andreas, for the research objectives, and Stéphanie for the introduction to CRoLEV. So what I will try to do now, very briefly, I will try to give you more details on how we try to, I hope you can see my screen now. So I will try to give you a more general background of how we try to reach the public, so the public outreach of CRoLEV, through our research objectives and through our various knowledge transfer activities as well. And I will not get into a lot of detail with the research objectives because I think Andreas gave a very clear summary of how the research objectives work. I will just focus on how these research objectives are actually transferred into practical activities and how we use those activities through research and knowledge transfer to engage with the public and to try and disseminate the work more generally. So I will be mostly focusing on the research outputs and the research-informed teaching and knowledge transfer activities. And I will try to also give you some idea of how you can see and engage with these deliverables and outputs if you are interested in our work through our website, which is the basic platform of reaching the public and disseminating our work. So in terms of research outputs, the main research output that we have until now is the rule of law and European values beyond the state-of-the-art analysis, which was written by my colleague Andreas, who spoke before, and myself. And what we are trying to do through this particular report is that we tend to show a very clear needs analysis of the research of the project. So trying to answer all of the questions that Andreas asked before, why it's necessary to research on the rule of law, how is this impacting our daily lives, how are crises like COVID or other type of crises affecting the rule of law. And also, we are trying to identify the correct quantitative and qualitative methodological approaches to research on the rule of law, and not only to research in the general sense, but also to try and measure aspects of the rule of law. So in order to do that, we have identified some tools that will be used, and these tools are also identified within this report that you can access online. I will show you how you can do that. And also within this research, within this report, we tried to clearly delimit the aims and objectives of both the normative and the empirical research. So the objective of CRoLEV is not only to research the rule of law in the more theoretical normative way, but we also try to collect data and use that data to measure the rule of law. So actually have a more practical approach to it as well, a more empirical approach to the research. At the end of this research, the results will be visualized in what we call an interactive dashboard that will be published in our website. And that dashboard will also be maintained after the project through various sustainable means. One of them is our website. And through that dashboard, people that want to engage with it will be able to see how we use single indicators relevant to the rule of law to measure particular aspects of the rule of law in Cyprus primarily. And the intention is also to develop this dashboard that can then later on be used to develop a broader index and to use it also for other member states of the EU and beyond. And of course, then gaps in Cyprus that Andreas discussed will be visualized in that particular dashboard. So within this report, you will see exactly how our research is developed, especially in terms of data collection, because we will have an empirical aspect to the research as well. And we will be collecting both hard data and soft data that are reflecting the single indicators that we think are relevant to our conceptualization of the rule of law that we will use to measure these single indicators for Cyprus. So in order to do that and to develop those single indicators, we will be collecting hard data and soft data. So in terms of hard data, we will be collecting data already existing, let's say, both from the thin approach of the rule of law, so mostly focusing on the judiciary, the independence of the judges that Andreas discussed before, and from the thick approach to the rule of law, also drawing connections with democracy, maybe the media, or things that are going beyond the traditional, the classic conceptualization of the rule of law as we have it. For the soft data, and particularly because the hard data on Cyprus are not sufficient, there are serious gaps in those already existent indexes. We will try to supplement the hard data through soft data that we will be collecting primarily from expert opinions through focus groups or surveys. And again, all of this data will be used to develop our own single indicators based on how we conceptualize the rule of law. You can find this publication on our website. I will try to show you now how this looks, if I am able to do it, or I can just copy paste the link. It is hyperlinked because I used it before. Okay, let me just. Okay, good. So this is where you will find our publication. This is the website basically, and you can just click on research if you go on the website and then publications. And our report that I just explained is just here, and you can click on view publication to see it in a PDF format. Now, in terms of research outputs as well, you can also take a look at our digital library, which is again uploaded in our website. And the objective of this digital library is to create an open access list of sources and institutional reports that can be used from anyone who is interested in the rule of law. And again, you just click on the learning resources and then digital library, and you can just scroll down to see sources, open access sources that are relevant to your research. Okay, now, in terms of activities beyond the research, we have a lot of research-informed teaching and knowledge transfer activities in CRoLEV, and these include LLM modules, intensive courses, and trainings. For the LLM modules, we have this, it's usually block delivery modules that are incorporated into our LLM programs, but these are also accessible from externals that are interested in taking part. And for the intensive courses, we have a very long list of intensive courses that will be taking place throughout the project of CRoLEV. And an example and an indicative list of these intensive courses is found on your slides. And these intensive courses are also, depending on the delivery method, they're also available through our website that I will show again how you can find. So again, if you just go on our website and you click on the didactic material, so learning resources and then didactic material on our website, you can see that there are already 2 intensive courses available on the website, and you just click on the topic that is of interest to you, or you can access everything if you are interested in the rule of law more generally. And by clicking on that, you are basically requesting access to the courses that were already delivered to universities, partner universities that we have in the project. And as soon as you are granted access from the team, you will also have full access in the material, like PowerPoint presentations, handouts, module handbooks, research methods, anything that is part of the intensive course. And you will also have the chance to have a look at how our LLM modules are structured, the content of the LLM modules, and of course, feel free to get in touch with the team if you want to find out more information about these activities. Now, how we contact our public, as Stéphanie also already mentioned, the contact information and the accounts. Feel free to follow us on our social media and subscribe in our website to get every newsletter and stay posted on the activities. Now, just a final thing from me, we have a forthcoming event on the 8th of December, the CRoLEV Research Day. This will be divided in two parts, the research themed workshop, where we will have more targeted presentations on the substantive aspects of the rule of law, like human rights and climate justice. And the second part will be mostly targeted towards PhD students, early career researchers, and others, of course. And it will have a more interdisciplinary research approach through research sessions and methodologies around the rule of law. So stay in touch so that you can find out more about this. Thank you for your attention, and I think we can continue with the
Thank you very much, Katerina, for setting out the public outreach part of CRoLEV. I hope that everybody has taken notes of the forthcoming activities and also take advantage of the CRoLEV platform, please. Thank you. Now, our next speaker is with us. Hello, Aleksandra.
Hi.
Do you want, Aleksandra, are you able to share your presentation?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
I'm trying now.
You're trying. If you can't, we will try it ourselves, but if you could try it first.
Okay.
So, in the meantime, let me introduce Aleksandra to us. Dr. Aleksandra Gliszczynska-Grabias is an assistant professor at the Institute of Law Studies at the Polish Academy of Sciences. Aleksandra is a regular visitor for us, so we thank her for her time. Aleksandra gave an extraordinary presentation under EU POP on some aspects of SLAPs and those litigations against human rights defenders. You can find the video actually on the EU POP website, so we can share it again with everyone. By the way, one of the features that was not referred to today, because there are too many, is that in the CRoLEV website, if you actually scroll down on the homepage, you will find a number of other related projects, one of which is EU POP. So you can click on that and then visit the variety of resources on EU POP all around judicial independence, rule of law, populism, to which quite a few of us have already participated. Now, Aleksandra is going to talk to us about challenges of the rule of law crisis in Poland in the context of respecting human rights protections standards.
Thank you so much. I will start. I was wondering, and thank you first. As I said, today is a crazy day. Thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on the initiative, on the program. It's amazing, and I'm really proud to be a part of it. So thank you again for the invitation and for having me among the speakers and participants of the program. When I was preparing even the slides, I was wondering if red is a proper color, if it's not too aggressive for an academic presentation. But then I thought that perhaps this is a good metaphor of the state of things, of affairs as they stand today in Poland when it comes to the rule of law, or rather the process of dismantling of the rule of law, as it's getting worse and worse, even though there are victories, so to say, of the pro rule of law side, because we are, or the lawyers, scholars, etc., engaged in defending the rule of law are winning in courts, including the European Court of Human Rights. I will get to this later on, and the Court of Justice of the European Union. But the more cases are being won by the rule of law side of this conflict, so to say, the more frustration it causes, as it doesn't change a lot in the domestic national situation, both in the Polish courts, but also more generally the rule of law and human rights protection as well. And I will try to show today to you this link between the rule of law crisis and the lowering of the standards of human rights protection. So if I can ask for the first slide. Well, I found this quote. It's not mine. It's from Andreas Jakob from Verfassungsblog, but I think that it's really telling, and it's important, because we very often tend to talk about the rule of law crisis in general, and I'm not denying that there is one, and that it applies to the EU as such too. But we should not forget that actually it started and it's being led by two countries, namely Hungary and Poland. And of course, this is EU's responsibility to deal with this crisis caused by these two governments, or these two national situations. But we should all the time stress that that the solving, or the tools to solve this crisis and this problem lay to the large extent within national jurisdictions and national situations more generally and broadly, of these two states. And I think that within the discussions of if EU should do more, or EU Commission should act more promptly, of course they should, but at the same time it's important to call the most guilty ones by their names. And I would claim that these are foremost the governments of Poland and Hungary, to be named within the rule of law crisis nowadays. Okay, the next slide, please. Yes, so I said that that there are victories, and I should mention here four very special people that got together some years ago within the initiative that is now well known in Poland and in Brussels for sure. They are called Free Courts, and they are doing a lot of things. The most of the cases won in both of the European courts, so they had a lot of to do with these victories and other victories within this fight for the rule of law, for the preservation of the rule of law. But one of their initiatives within the Free Courts initiative is such a report called, now with the latest edition, 2,365 days of lawlessness, when they put down, they monitor all most important events, all developments concerning the rule of law crisis from the very beginning. I think it started from 2016 or 2017 when they started to monitor it. So it's available online. It's in both Polish and English language versions. So these are just this is just an example of one of the perhaps most important events, so to say, or the court victories. July 14th, 2021, when the Court of Justice of the European Union suspended the activities of the disciplinary chamber of the Supreme Court. And the order for interim measures was issued in this case, regarding the so-called Muzzle Act that actually silenced the Polish judges and deprived them of their independence. But on the very same day, Ms. Yulia, the head of the Constitutional Tribunal in Poland, ruled that Poland does not need to respect the decisions of the Court of Justice of the European Union, imposing interim measures regarding the judicial system and the procedure before Polish courts. Well, this is unprecedented, unseen, but it happened. And actually, from this moment on, in my opinion, we cannot claim anymore that Poland belonged to the European legal sphere or system. And we are driving further and further away also from the European system of human rights protection, because if you do not have the very basic guarantees, namely the right to court, secured, then all other rights are actually endangered when you're in a situation where your rights and freedoms are being discussed, analyzed, and judged by the Polish courts. So I would see this day as one of the most important days within the whole saga of fighting for
Aleksandra,
Can you hear me now?
yes.
Okay. Was I heard when I was speaking about the last slide?
Yes, we just
Okay.
lost it for like a few seconds.
Oh, I swear to God, I didn't even touch my laptop, so it must be something really wrong today with the system. But it's good when you if you can hear me. If not, then please write this on chat so I can react. Well, so this is also from the Free Courts Initiative report. So this is June 2022. So by now it's worse. You can see with these black figures, these are so-called neo judges. So the judges that were elected by the unconstitutionally acting Council of Judiciary, National Council of Judiciary. So these people marked black here are not judges at all, but they are sitting as judges in the Supreme Court. And of course, we have here Extraordinary Review and Public Affairs Chamber and Disciplinary Chamber, both not the Supreme Court or not courts, not having the attributes of independent tribunal and court in the opinion of both European courts. So actually they should not be operating at all, even after the so-called review of the disciplinary chamber and the new form of the disciplinary chamber that has been actually in operations for the last month or so. It hasn't changed the very fact that all these judges are being, or these people are being elected by the body that is unconstitutional itself. So these people should not be there at all. And as you can see, this process of adding the neo judges to other chambers of the Supreme Court is also progressing. So the result of it is that very soon we may have the situation where most of the neo judges will be sitting also in this, so to say, old chambers of the Supreme Court, legal chambers of the Supreme Court. Both Extraordinary Review Chamber and Disciplinary Chamber are illegal, are acting illegally. Unbelievable, but true. This is the reality. So the next slide, please. Okay, so now getting to human rights, because sometimes it seems that these are like separate issues that we deal here with, like a high level, hardcore problems of the Supreme Court, of the judiciary, the independence of judiciary, the independence of the Constitutional Tribunal, etc. But translates directly into the problems with the human rights protection in Poland. And we have some major examples here. I think most of you or all of you have heard about this change in Polish law taken by or introduced by also the illegally acting constitutional tribunal, illegally in this sense that people, some of the so-called judges who were sitting on the bench and they issued this judgment were also appointed illegally. They shouldn't be there. So it also, causes the question, or it raises the question of the legality of the judgment. And for most of the lawyers, vast majority of lawyers, I would say, legal scholars, practitioners, etc., it's clear that this is not a judgment at all. At the same time, it causes real consequences, real effects for the life and health of Polish women, not mentioning other aspects of their well-being. So on October 2022, this constitutional tribunal with the people sitting on the bench that are not constitutional tribunal judges, some of them partly, announced that provisions of the law allowing pregnancies to be terminated when there is a high probability of a severe or irreversible fetal impairment of when the fetus is diagnosed with an incurable and life-threatening disease are unconstitutional. And in this judgment, they referred, among other provisions, to one of the provisions of the Polish constitution that says that the Republic of Poland shall ensure the legal protection of the life of every human being. So here, actually, the life of fetus had been treated or put in a better position than the life of a grown-up woman. So as I said, this verdict, this judgment should normally have no legal power, should be not binding, but it is binding, and the doctors in Polish hospitals act and behave according to this judgment. So you can only imagine what kind of consequences this non-judgment brings. I cannot think of any other more profound example of the violations of human rights and lowering of the standards of human rights protection than this kind of situation that is so closely linked. I mean, between the rule of law crisis, the judiciary independence, and at the same time, human rights protection, in this case, human rights of women, women rights. But we have also perhaps not that profound, but also visible tendencies or things happening within the human rights agenda and human rights protection system. I think that some of the notions that are firmly established already in the law and language of human rights internationally have been changed, like hate speech, when hate speech is now mostly being seen as hate speech directed against the majority, including the Catholic majority when it comes to the religious issues, and not the protection of minorities. Not even going into the field of refugee rights protection, with the most drastic violations happening and non-reaction being the response from the state, actually the state causing these violations of human rights standards on the Polish border with Belarus. Then LGBTQ plus rights. The only category of the discussion that is being actually inspired, promoted, and done by the governing powers in Poland is this context of propaganda. So there are attempts to silence the LGBTQ plus community, to deny them basic rights, like the right to assembly and association. So they are being under enormous threat and stress, and all of their actions are being called the propaganda, and there are also the ideas to ban this kind of propaganda as it is being done in Russia, for example. And of course, media freedom, and this famous or infamous SLAPS. So the lawsuits, massive number of lawsuits initiated by the government, by state-owned companies against independent journalists, but also against scholars, with the example of Professor Sadurski's 5 lawsuits initiated against him by state institutions, and the ruling party can serve as the best example here. So these are like really concrete and visible examples of how this link works between non-guarantees of the rule of law and the general lowering of standards of human rights protection. And the last slide, please. Thank you. So this is one of the most I abuse the word profound, I believe, but it's really shocking and striking, because these are judgments of the European Court of Human Rights. The first one, the most famous, I would say, CRoLEV versus Poland, where the European Court of Human Rights said that the Polish Constitutional Tribunal in its current composition cannot be seen as a tribunal established by law. And publicly, Yulia Przyłębska, so the head of the Constitutional Tribunal, declared this judgment as non-existent. So what kind of human rights protection guarantees do we have where the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights, the most important international human rights protection body within our sphere of human rights protection, are being called and treated as non-existent? So there is none of such protection, as I see it. And then just from a month ago, Gliszczyn versus Poland, Judge Gliszczyn is one of the most well-known, courageous, and most hated by these in power today in Poland judges. That he was one of the first, I would say, victims of this new reading of the rule of law in Poland. And here the European Court of Human Rights found that the disciplinary chamber of the Supreme Court was not an independent and impartial tribunal established by law. So here we have the same what a year before, or more than a year before, was said by the Court of Justice of the European Union. And here the very sad conclusion is that it doesn't change anything, because normally these chambers, both chambers of the Supreme Court, should stop acting immediately. But they work full steam, and I don't see any signals that this should be changing soon. So I will stop here. I will be, of course, ready and happy to answer the questions and to discuss further. But unfortunately, this is how it looks like. And we should, I think, remember that, that the rule of law crisis is more than just the rule of law. It's about human rights. It's about the democracy as such. And the consequences are being seen in many, many spheres of our everyday life. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Aleksandra. Yes, I think the last message is the most powerful one, and this is why, in CRoLEV, we're looking at the rule of law, but also at values, because yes, you're right. So I think, thank you for your intervention. It's extremely helpful to picture how can this actually happen in practice on the ground concretely, despite having a, available framework at multiple levels. So thank you for this. This is very encouraging. If you can stay with us, hopefully there is no IT glitch until a bit later, after we will have listened to the other special guests. I'm sure that there will be some discussion around that. Now, it's time to play a video if we can. Yes. So basically, our next speaker is not available today because she's actually traveling, but she was kind enough to provide us with a video, which is a 10 minutes video. So Dr. Yulia, let me try to pronounce this properly. Razmetaeva. She is actually a colleague from Ukraine, so we know her from there, and we are very happy that she's with us, or not with us, but she's participating in CRoLEV. Yulia is the head of the Center for Law Ethics and Digital Technologies at the Yaroslav Mudryi National Law University in Kharkiv, with which we have a long-standing cooperation relationship among our two law schools. So we were by their side when the events unfolded in February 2022, and since then. Yulia is also at the moment a visiting researcher at Uppsala University in Sweden, and we wish her all the best there. She belongs to those Ukrainian female researchers who had to leave and are now living and working somewhere in Europe, primarily. And good news for our friends from Ukraine. They were actually awarded the Jean Monnet Center of Excellence also in the fields of European fundamental values in digital era. So it's completely relevant to what we're doing here at CRoLEV. And of course, we are basically feeding into each other. Hence, this is what Yulia is with us today. So Katerina, are we able to play the video? Perfect.
Good afternoon. I apologize for the fact that I'm recording a video and can't attend in person. I'm very grateful for the invitation of Professor Stéphanie, Laulhé, Shaelou, and I'm happy that we can cooperate at the level of the Centers of Excellence. Our interests overlap here at the Center for the Rule of Law and European Values focuses on the rule of law, democracy, and fundamental rights, and the recently launched European Fundamental Values in Digital Era Center, also co-founded by the European Union under the Erasmus+ program, focused on fundamental values-based framework for the issues shaped and brought about by digitalization in Ukraine. So I want to present here some preliminary results of a study that arose of a concern about contemporary threats to the rule of law and was built on the axiological approach. What about AI in courts? What is wrong with the rule of law? The digitalization has called into question many of the foundations and values that we used to rely on, forcing us to reconsider their importance and understanding. Some existing challenges to the rule of law may have weaknesses of viability of its concept, which combined with the features of the digital age creates a double whammy for the rule of law. The tendency to the growing populism and the trend of instrumentalization of law may play a role here. But what AI technologies do, they significantly exacerbate the negative effect of some attacks on certain values and foundations. There are three types of consequences of AI development and implementation that seriously undermine the rule of law could be seen here: the weakening of judicial independence, the increase of predictability in its improper understanding, and algorithmization of the decision making. As for judicial independence issue, that's something we could see as consequences of AI influence, and this influence runs along two lines: personal and public. On a personal level, judges and juries, just like other people, are to some extent involved in the digital space today. They may have social media account and other digital footprint that make it easier for stakeholders to profile them and get a more accurate psychological portrait. This, in turn, is used to build a strategy in litigation based on the vulnerabilities and characteristics of specific decision makers. On a public level, digital tools, especially algorithms, make it relatively easy to manipulate public opinion. They allow, for example, certain opinions about litigation to be widely disseminated, imbued with the right doubts and the right method to influence both decision makers and the public expectations of those decisions. This is especially important in high-profile cases with high publicity or political implications. As for the issue of predictability, primarily the predictability of judicial decisions, this may lead to such consequences as public doubts about judicial impartiality of professionalism, as well as rising pressure on judges. These public doubts may not be based on facts, but on false premises or some out-of-context statement, and may be rapidly divergent in the digital environment. The deeper consequences may include a distortion of the essence of legal certainty, which in turn affects a distortion of the rule of law, since legal certainty is one of its elements. So AI technologies already makes it possible to fairly accurately predict the outcomes of court cases. And the degree of such accuracy is increased every day. Why it's already threatening? The first important point in predictive practice regarding judicial decisions reflects how pieces of data collected in huge quantities and successfully put together thanks to smart technologies leave less and less space for incalculable actions and opinions. Another important point is that the court predictive system belongs to the private sector, whether it be French project Predictis or correction offender management profiling for alternative sanctions or this harm assessment risk tool. So public sector duties and goals are different from private sector ones, for instance, profit maximization. And the lack of ethical basis for AIs and the absence of stable standards for them can lead and already have led to growing inequality and undermining the value foundations of justice. The problem is not that we can now examine the decision-making of judges with the help of technologies and successfully find errors, biases, or incompetence of some judges in some decisions. But the call to consider technological tools in the context of attack of the independence and attack on the rule of law doesn't mean that we should abandon such studies. However, we must take them with caution. The problem is that we began to already trust the results of certain technologies, certain algorithms, primarily algorithms, of course, perceiving them as objective, impartial, and error-free. And as for algorithmization of decision-making, AIs are becoming an increasingly necessary part of decision-making, and this leads to some relying on the prompts offered by AI. They tend to perceive algorithmic decisions as more reliable compared to the human ones because algorithms, they seemingly impartial, unbiased, or based on facts. In addition, they are impersonal because a specific person, official or judge who voices and personify the decision often doesn't stand behind the voices, the decision in the case of AI. There are many expected benefits, of course, of implementing AIs in decision-making, as well as many legitimate concerns. The problem that arises here can be described as those that arise from the needs to interpret the law and the problems of explaining the decision made on the basis of law, especially in the motivation part. In the broader sense, the question arises as to whether justice can be automated. So law is also hermeneutic practice, and we need to interpret it in specific legal context. While the interpretation of law given by judges differs across legal systems and is not always what everyone agrees on, AI is not a good substitute here. The ability of algorithm to interpret law is more than questionable as such. The interpretation of law is not mechanical work and is not something that can be programmed for the endless series of cases that the courts face. Indeed, there are simple cases and there are those that can be grouped into typical cases. However, the variability in live cases and individual circumstances is higher than the variability that is acceptable for the working algorithm. And also, the interpretation of law is based not only on data that can be fed to the smart algorithm, but also on the experience and to some extent on the intuition of judges. So also, as for explanation, the ability of algorithm to explain the decision is also questionable. Particularly, there is a difference between the descriptive part and the reasoning part of the core decision, and AI seems to be able to describe the solution, but not to motivate it. So in most cases, we can follow how the algorithm arrives at a particular solution, but it is not clear why it arrives in that solution. The impossibility to draw a line between the human and algorithmic decision and the distribution of responsibility also leads to the blurring of the concept of responsibility and affects to the rule of law. Further context is important for decision making. This can be a weakness affecting the independence of judges when it comes to political context, for example, but this can be a strength of human decision, the one that allows us to maintain justice in a deeper sense. The example of discrimination cases is very illustrative here because you need to understand the social practice, stereotypes, and the reasons for such practice. To sum up, despite conflicting opinions about whether the implications of digitalization and algorithm for the rule of law are rather positive or rather negative, there are some threats that cannot be ignored. Influence on judges occurs in the personal sphere and the public sphere, influence which led to the additional challenges to the independence of judges. Some influence which leads to the distortion of the essence of legal certainty and shift of trust from the courts to certain AI technologies and their creators. That's something we shouldn't ignore. Algorithmic decision making, rather the question of whether the results will be fair or at least as fair as those handed down by the human judges. However, we should not rely entirely on algorithms in the courts, and their ability to interpret law and provide proper explanation is questionable, and they are lack of understanding of context, intuition, and social practice. So even partial reliance on algorithms should be used with the caution. So I will stop here. Please feel free to contact me for the questions and comments then.
Thank you. I think what Yulia presented is actually very interesting for all of us, and it's a good transition from Aleksandra, because, you know, basically the European public legal order that we think has been functioning for the past 70 years is not much if you don't have the actual digital version of it, or if you don't have, you know, the digitalization of that public legal. So it's a very interesting area. Of course, Yulia is not here for us to ask her questions, but she kindly put the presentation. I am not sure whether people online could hear her voice. We got some comments. Can I? Okay, thank you. Katerina has posted the link of the video in the chat. In any case, the video is also in the MS folder. Yes, right. So people are free to actually take it away, as I said before, but with proper acknowledgements always. So thank you. Now, let's give the floor to our last speaker, because he's been very patient. Balázs has, I think, joined the meeting among the first. Balázs, can you hear us?
I hope I can. Can you hear me?
Hello, hello, very nice to
So
know
you can even see me. Okay.
We can see you, we can hear you. Give me a second to introduce you properly, and then the floor is yours. So our colleague Balázs comes from the Citizens Law project, with which we are very happy to team up on a number of initiatives and activities. So Dr. Balázs is actually a postdoctoral, he's a researcher, belongs to the research team. He's a member of the research team of Citizens Law. But of course, you are also, you are from, actually from Hungary, and you have, you hold a position as well in Hungary. I would not dare to try to pronounce the name of the institution. If you could do that, Balázs, how do you actually pronounce it?
I can, of course. Eötvös Loránd University Faculty of Law.
Okay, well, I have to practice. Thank you very much. We are very happy to have you because we have had a number of exchanges between our two projects. We can see that they have a lot of similarities and a lot of common interests and common challenges. So Balázs, we are listening to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation. And I'm really impressed by your project. So I wish you all the best, and I really hope in a good cooperation. So the first thing will be that I'm trying to share my slides. Hopefully it will work. Okay, so I suppose you can see my slides, and if you can't, please do tell me and we will find out something. Because right now I put it on full screen, so I can only see the slides. So please do tell me if there's anything going wrong. Okay, so thank you very much for your invitation, and I'm trying to be as conscious, as concise as possible in my 15 minutes of presentation. So as you can see, the title of our project is Citizens' Law, and it has a much longer subtitle too, Towards a New Approach to Strengthen the Rule of Law in Europe, Incorporating EU Citizens' Perceptions of Law. And first of all, let me remind you that the head of the project is Professor Mark Hertog from University of Groningen. Actually, I have the privilege to present some basics on our project in behalf of Mark. So I think I should not explain this picture, but might be interesting that even in 2013, Vice Commissioner Reding argued that although there's an economic and financial crisis started in 2009, and now I quote her.
I think we cannot see the next slide. If you can change your slide or put it in full screen mode.
And right now, can you see it right now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
So now that's okay. Okay, first of all, now I move. Now can you see the next slide?
Yes.
Okay, I will keep it this way. So even in 2013, voices from the Commission argued that besides the economic and financial crisis, we also have been confronted on several occasions with a true rule of law crisis. So something has been happening in the European Union during the last decade. And what makes it more interesting that in response to all these developments, the European Commission has been considering legal, political, and financial sanctions, but experience show that the effects of these measures are limited. And this is the main drive behind our project, because in our project, we will study the rule of law from an empirical perspective. And our ambition is to use these findings to develop a new and more effective ways to strengthen the rule of law in the EU. So basically, to be honest, we're a bit dissatisfied with the results of this discourse. So we try to somehow turn the perspective toward the empirical basis of rule of law. This is the outline of my presentation. First, let me share some ideas on rule of law. Then I will move to the research questions. Then I will elaborate on our research approach and the methods and data used. And the last remarks will be about the project as such. So nobody denies there's already a large body of literature on the rule of law. However, all of these, or most of these pieces or studies focus almost exclusively on the legal foundations of rule of law. And this seems to be quite a technical approach. And the main points of all these studies is to define some kind of checklist in order to collect all the important points that can be checked in another or in a given country, or in a country or in another one. However, there's a skepticism with regard or towards these checklists or towards this exclusively legal approach or perspective on the rule of law. So this may suggest that something more is needed. And as you can see in the Venice Commission checklist, it is focused on issues like legality, legal certainty, or access to justice. However, and these will be some ideas on an extended approach to rule of law. This anatomical approach only focuses on the legal dimension of rule of law, but it overlooks the fact that success of legal rules and institutions ultimately depends on the social embeddedness of law and individuals' relationship with the law. So, for instance, we can imagine easily situations, and I, as a Central European citizen, I can also imagine situations like this, in which all these formal legal institutions exist, but in which the law does not rule at all. So we argue that a more sensitive approach is needed, because we have to understand somehow how can law become socially normative. Therefore, we suggest to turn toward the so-called social foundations of rule of law, besides, not in place, but besides these legal foundations. Now the question is that, what do we mean by the term social embeddedness of law? And here let me explain an important insight we got during our last discussions. Basically, if you want to somehow summarize the difference between the legal foundational approach and the social foundational approach, you may conclude that most legal studies of the rule of law see the rule of law as a noun. What are the most important principles, legal regulations, and legal institutions of rule of law? However, by contrast, the empirical study of rule of law sees the rule of law as a verb. When and how does the law actually rule in everyday life? So this is our starting point. We're looking for this verb-like approach of rule of law. Let me turn to the research questions. This is the, I'm sure that you're all familiar with the World Justice Project. And this is the actual ranking. And as you can see, Denmark is on the top, Hungary is at the bottom, and the Netherlands is somewhere in the first half of this ranking. And the first point I have to emphasize that our project has a comparative nature, because it not only focuses on the Netherlands, from where we got a grant from the Dutch Dutch scientific agency, but the two extreme parts of this ranking are also included in the project. So basically, we work with the Netherlands, Denmark, and Hungary, the two opposite ends of this scale. And we believe that this so-called sampling strategy may give us a more in-depth understanding of the rule of law in the everyday life. You can see here our, how to say, central or major research question. How do citizens' everyday experiences of law in the Netherlands, Denmark, and Hungary shape the level of public support for the legal foundations of the rule of law? And how can we incorporate these findings into a new governance toolkit to strengthen the rule of law in Europe? So basically, we have two basic orientations. First, we would like to understand how the so-called everyday citizen experiences shape public support for the legal foundations of rule of law. And we have a second point, that we would like to fruitfully use all these experiences and understandings to help the development of a new governance toolkit to strengthen the rule of law in Europe. And this research question can be divided into 4 sub-questions. The first one is, how do people in the Netherlands, Denmark, and Hungary experience the law in their everyday life? Second, what are the underlying mechanisms that explain positive and negative perceptions of law? Third, how do social foundations support or undermine the legal foundations of rule of law? And last, the so-called normative or prospective point is, how can we incorporate all these findings into a new governance toolkit to strengthen the rule of law in Europe? So let me compare our ambitions to the so-called settled method of measuring rule of law in the European Union. If you consider this so-called settled or normal method, you can see that it has a top-down orientation. It mostly relies on quantitative indicators. The primary targets are EU member states, and the main focus is legal compliance. However, we try to understand the rule of law in the EU, so we have a bottom-up orientation, meaning that citizens and their attitudes are important and relevant for us. In order to get closer to all these attitudes, we try to have a so-called ethnographic outlook. Besides member states, we try to focus on the EU citizens, and what we are looking for is not legal compliance, but legal consciousness. Our main socio-legal studies orientation relies on the so-called legal consciousness studies, or the legal consciousness-oriented socio-legal studies. And just to remind you, there are some classic pieces, the so-called Commonplace of Law by Patricia Ewig and Susan S. Silby, and Mark Hertog also published a book on legal consciousness in the Netherlands with a very intriguing title, Nobody's Law. So this is our, I would say, scholarly mindset and the starting point. Some claims, and these claims can be divided into 4 points. First of all, there are some substantive justice claims. Do people feel that law meets their justice expectations? There might be also some procedural justice claims, whether people do think that legal procedures treat them fairly. And there are also claims about punitiveness. Does the legal system provide the right punishment? And there might be other claims about the responsiveness of the legal order. Does the law respond adequately to the needs and concerns of society? So basically, our empirical study and discussion will focus on these 4 underlying mechanisms. Let me turn briefly to our data collection and our methods used. You can see our methodological toolkit here. Of course, we will do literature review, because you can always learn from this settled literature. We will have focus groups studies. We will also use the relatively new way of photo elicitation interviews. Then we also try to have some social media analysis, and we will have national surveys. Let me give you some examples. Why focus groups can be useful? Because focus group transcript analysis can help to somehow get closer to the attitudes of people in terms of opinions, and you can compare these two parts. The first is about a focus group in UK, and the second one is about a focus group in Poland. And what is interesting that participants in the UK say that the law gives you confidence in everyday life, and if you are not going to break the law, it doesn't cause any problems for you. However, or on the contrary, in Poland, the participants argue that the law is created to screw ordinary people, and they conclude that law is not for us, it is not meant for most of the Poles. So basically, you can find good points for comparison with the help of focus groups. Let me discuss the use of national surveys only briefly. Basically, with the help of national surveys, we can have a better idea of the scale and distribution of many ideas about law. So it can help us to have a so-called bigger picture. And what about this relatively new approach, the so-called photo elicitation interview? Basically, it relies on the wisdom that a picture says more than 1,000 words, and it is about inserting a photograph into a research interview. In each country, 50 persons, obviously with different backgrounds, will be recruited to participate in this study. All participants will take part in a preliminary camera training session, and then they will be asked to take at least 10 photographs during a 4 weeks period. And the only thing we ask from them is somehow portray the positive or negative role of law in their everyday life. These photos will be collected in a diary. And finally, there will be a research interview, and the participants will be presented with each photograph, and they will be asked to explain what each image represents. So we hope this will work. In the final stage of the project, we also test our findings in the real world, meaning that we will organize workshops with rule of law experts in Copenhagen and in Budapest, and then we will have also roundtable sessions with stakeholders, including policymakers, NGOs, and other stakeholders in The Hague and in Brussels. And based on these meetings, we will try to translate our findings.
And we cannot hear you very well at the moment. Maybe you're muted, or is your connection good enough?
Sorry, I don't know what happened. It was muted. No idea.
Okay, you can continue now.
When did you lose me? When did you lose me? Sorry. Just a few seconds.
On this particular slide. Yes, on this particular slide.
Okay. So this slide is about basically the so-called new governance toolkit to strengthen the Europe.
I think you are muted again. I'm not aware of the reason.
Sorry.
Yes, me neither.
It says that one member of the session muted me.
I don't know who. Can you please repeat?
Okay, I will try, and now I will check whether I'm muted or not. Okay, so basically, new toolkit based on our empirical findings to strengthen the so-called to strengthen the rule of law in Europe. And of course, we are not fully aware how will this new governance toolkit look like, but what is important that we really try to, so to say, develop an online dashboard that can display data about people's positive and negative perceptions of law and will suggest concrete policy actions to influence the levels of substantive justice, procedural justice, punitiveness, and responsiveness of the legal system. And some other elements might also be included in this toolkit. Some reflective questions to assess positive and negative perceptions about the law, some short recognizable, some short narratives of successful examples to strengthen the rule of law in various countries, and perhaps some policy tools that may foster or help more public engagement with the rule of law. For instance, to organize EU-wide citizen dialogues, or how to develop the so-called rule of law literacy. Okay, now I move. Basically, what you can see, this is our agenda. The project we run 4 years. We started this year. The first year will be about setting up our conceptual framework. Then we will elaborate on our case studies. And we will finish the project with the so-called stakeholder discussions and other sessions. And hopefully in the last year, we will be able to come up with the frame of this new governance toolkit. This is our team. As you can see, we are 4. Professor Mark Hertog leads the research group, and there are 3 postdocs, Erin Jackson, responsible for studying the Netherlands, Monica Lindbeck, who will deal with the Danish part of our project. I'm Balázs, and I have to mention that Ole Hammerslev from Denmark will be a so-called local field coordinator and a helping hand there. I hope I may raise your attention to our project. And if you are interested, please follow our homepage. And thank you very much for your kind attention.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Balázs. Despite the IT issues, I think we heard everything. It was extremely interesting, particularly for us at Progress, because we have a lot of methodology, tools, and ideas and activities in common. It's clear. But I think also for most participants, to see how the rule of law can be approached from a state perspective. I think this is very, very interesting, Balázs. And I'm sure you will let us know once you have this sort of activity that you tried with rule of law experts and stakeholders, because it could be that we can disseminate information for you as well. Now, we thank everyone for being with us for 2 hours almost. We are a bit behind schedule compared to what we had initially planned, partly because we had some IT issues at the beginning. There's a class that would like to start here in a few minutes, so we will keep opening those. And so I'm afraid that we will not be able to hold a Q&A session, but I would like to encourage everyone, okay, those who are here, it's easier because they can network with us over lunch. But the others who are online, I would like to encourage you to actually perhaps put some questions in the chat now. Yeah, and we will, or email us, of course, and we will actually take all those questions away, and we will probably create some sort of discussion forum and get back to the group, some questions or with some answers. And also, we would be very happy if you could give us some feedback on the activity today. It's always very helpful for us. I'm not sure we have put a feedback form actually, but you can actually email us or put it in the chat as well as we are. So we would like to thank everyone, including our speakers and our special guests, for their time and efforts, and wish everyone a good remaining of the day. And hoping to talk to you soon. Thank you, Katerina. Thank you, Andreas. See you soon. Bye.